Good morning, everybody. Today.
Guten Morgen allerseits. Hier in Straßburg, Pressekonferenz des S&D-Vorstands. Ich gebe an unsere Vorsitzende das Wort, Iratxe García Perez. Danke sehr. Guten Morgen. Danke, dass Sie zu unserer üblichen Aussprache hier kommen, damit wir die Plenartagung mal durchgehen können. Selbstverständlich stehe ich dann auch zu Ihrer Verfügung, wenn Sie noch konkrete Nachfragen hätten zur Tagesordnung der Plenartagung diese Woche, aber natürlich auch andere Themen, die für Sie interessant sein könnten. Ja, diese Agenda des Plenums ist natürlich sehr stark gekennzeichnet durch den vergangenen Europäischen Rat, also letzte Woche.
Issues which are of fundamental importance to the building of Europe, the economic situation, Ukraine, or indeed immigration. And that's the question I'd like to start on. There's no doubt that the situation really is extremely worrying. There's been a clear change of course, position and tone in the pronouncements and the positions taken by the EPP, the European People's Party, at this time which is so critical for Europe, in particular in view of our need to build a common position. We've said on many occasions in the past that the European Union's migration policy needs to be structured with a common agreement. It has to be informed by a sense of responsibility. And it's essential that we continue to promote the fundamental values of the European Union, solidarity, for example. It's also important that we address the question of migration with a global, holistic approach. We have to find ways of tackling migratory flows. We also have to promote cooperation, support and development for third countries. So how can we go about ensuring that we move towards a common European migration system? Over the last week, we've seen the way in which the people of Europe have responded to the terrible tragedy which has hit Turkey and Syria during the recent earthquake. Tens of thousands of people dead, disappeared, starvation, freezing cold, desperation. And the people of Europe stepped up and responded in a united, humane way to these people who'd been hit by the earthquake with economic support, groups of volunteers, fire personnel. So many individuals, so many citizens have shown this side of Europe, which we all need so badly, a Europe based on solidarity. At a time such as this, I found it completely unacceptable that some political forces continue to push for Europe becoming a fortress Europe surrounded by walls. This isn't the Europe which the Socialist and Democrat group believes in. And it would appear that part of the EPP realised that we have to sit down and negotiate an agreement. And we're willing to do that. However, those who we won't reach agreement with are those who want to simply erect walls to keep out those people escaping wars, famine, suffering. So we'll have to see what happens, what form the debates take this week and over the next few weeks and months. But once again, we have many reasons for concern. We're also concerned by recent declarations suggesting the way in which the extreme right is encroaching on the question of rights. This is something we've seen emerging over the last few weeks and months, and we'll have to see what form that takes. It's very worrying to see in which the EPP is getting ever closer to the extreme right. As they move away from the political centre, that takes away the foundations for European cooperation at the political level, and that damages the image of Europe. I'm very worried, for example, when I hear Berlusconi saying he will never meet Zelensky, and I do wonder where the EPP is actually going. And since I've mentioned Zelensky, there'll also be a debate and a resolution on the situation in Ukraine 1 year on from the start of the war. I think all of you will have watched with great emotion the important moment last week when President Zelensky came to the European Parliament in Brussels. And I think it's fair to say the European Parliament is still united in its desire to support Ukraine, financial support, military support, economic support. What we should be doing, however, is defending democracy and European values. This is something I can't say enough. This war isn't just about Ukraine. This is a war against democracy, against European values. And this is why so much is at stake. And this is why it's so important that we work together on a basis of unity to create a strong, powerful European position. In the European Council, there's also a debate on the European Green Deal, the Green Plan. And the plenary will be having a debate this week on European industrial policy. In the Socialist and Democrat group, we will be stressing our position, which is that in the Commission's initial plan, there is not enough importance given to the social dimension of this, and this is something which the Socialist and Democrat group will be trying to ensure be better reflected. This plan should be promoting high-quality jobs and accelerate the ecological transition. So that's something we're working on. We're currently working on the draft resolution, and I hope you follow that over the next few days. There will also be a resolution which was based on a S&D resolution regarding minimum income. The current Commission proposal is insufficient. Now more than ever, we have to support people. We have to support that people have a decent income. We have to try to do far more to help those groups in society who are most vulnerable, young people, women. The idea of talking about a basic minimum income in Europe is essential. We're not trying to take away powers from governments, but Europe can and must adopt legislation on this essential issue. So, as I said, we will be tabling a resolution on that. Another important point is changes to economic governance. As you know, ECOFIN is meeting today. We do hope that the European Commission will come forward with a legislative proposal to fundamentally reform our economic governance system. The European Union needs budgetary resources, tools which will enable us to respond quickly to crises, as we've seen on many occasions in the past. We've got our experience of SURE and the Resilience and Recovery Mechanism. That's also very important. Just to wind up, other issues which I think are worth looking at on the agenda. As you know, there's a topical debate which has been put forward by our political group regarding the spying scandal and media harassment in Greece. That's a very important question. The rule of law is a fundamental principle in our view, and we don't believe that we can be selective when it comes to ensuring that the rule of law be upheld. This is why it's important, we think, to talk about the state of the rule of law in Greece. I'd also like to mention a resolution on the Istanbul Convention, which, as you know, we've been calling for many years. We've been calling for EU ratification of the Istanbul Convention against gender violence. 8 member states of the European Union haven't ratified the Istanbul Convention yet. So we think it's important to draw attention to that, so as to ensure that the fight for rights for women and the fight against gender violence be recognised for the importance it is, so as to ensure that half our population aren't simply neglected. So having said all that, I'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have.
I think we start in the back. Please say your name and introduce your medium. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Matthijs Schiffers from Het Financiële Dagblad, the Netherlands. I have a question regarding the new transparency rules in the wake of Qatargate. If I'm correct, then the President herself had proposed a cooling off period of 12 to 24 months for former MEPs. And I think you, in your 15-point plan, had suggested a cooling off period of 24 months. And now, in the final agreement, we see 6 months. So I'm wondering if the two biggest groups want the president is, of course, a member of the biggest group. If the two biggest groups want 12 to 24 months, how can we end up with 6 months in the end?
Muchas gracias. Thank you for your question. You give me an opportunity to clarify this point around the measures that have been tabled by the European Parliament President. We welcome the measures. We worked on our own proposals as well and looked at how to implement them. We tried to be crystal clear here. We need standards to bolster transparency in the European Parliament. You are quite right. We, in our group, suggested a cooling-off period of 24 months. Currently, the President's proposal, though, stipulates 6 months. When the initial measures were adopted last week, we welcomed the measures, but we did state that they did not go far enough and that we would continue to work to ensure proper implementation and add new measures, improve some of the measures already adopted. We are aware that we as a group can have our views and position, but we also have to negotiate with the other political groups to come up with a consensus. So we continue to defend 24 months and we will continue to work towards that goal. But currently we have a 6-month proposal. So at least we are talking about the principle of a cooling off period and we'll have to look at implementation. The President Metsola has tabled a 15-point plan that's been adopted by the Conference of Presidents. But we also have a clear position by many groups saying that that does not go far enough and that we need to do far more, cover other issues. You mentioned the cooling off period, but there are other issues, declaration of interest, secondary sources of income, trips, which trips can be paid for by others, which trips can be made and which cannot. So that's all part of the debate that we've had within our political group. Now we have a series of measures that we in our group are implementing, but we also need to discuss with the Parliament as a whole, and we need to build majorities, and that is what we will continue to work on over the coming months.
Laura, please.
Hola, Iratxe, buenos días.
Good morning, Iratxe. I'm from the FA agency. I'd like to follow on from that question and ask which group has shown most ambition when it comes to the President's proposals, the cooling off period and the like, where there are other measures that could perhaps be applied unilaterally as well within the Socialist group. We decided to take a decision on a number of points. We believe that we will implement those measures in our political group, regardless of what happens elsewhere in the Parliament. Let me give you an example. Banning gifts valued over €100. Ban on accepting or going along with trips that are paid for by third parties, unless it is linked to parliamentary diplomacy or foundations, political party foundations and the like. Otherwise, there would be a ban on trips paid for by private entities or third countries. We have made a pledge when it comes to the transparency register. All S&D MEPs will have to keep up to date our public agenda so that European citizens can see what we are doing. It's true that it is voluntary, but we in our group have committed to abiding by those measures. We're also looking at protection of whistleblowers. We are working on a tangible group proposal. We'll look at different aspects. We'll look at protection of whistleblowers amongst MEPs and protection of whistleblowers amongst staff. We're looking at setting up a body within our group to deal with this issue, the protection of whistleblowers. There are other issues that we in our group are working on, standards that we have adopted internally, and we hope that they would become the standard across the Parliament. And in the meantime, we'll be enforcing those standards.
Further questions? Yes, please, Eleonora.
Hi, I am Eleonora from Euractiv. I want to follow up about this last point of Qatargate. So you suggest all the internal rules you're applying in the socialist group. You want to bring in the Metzola's points, like the points you approved last week. And another question about migration. The last European Council approved a tough line on migration, in particular about returns and to tight European borders. And I'm wondering, in this context, how negotiations on the pact are going. If you want, for example, to put a line or something about the relocation and solidarity within the pact, because in the external dimension, these words are not appearing anymore. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. As you know, we have tabled proposals as a political group. We sent those proposals to Metzola. We're working on implementing those proposals ourselves as quickly as possible. On some of the proposals, we need to fine-tune the detail. Our group proposals will be implemented internally, and we're trying to push for them to be accepted across the European Parliament as a whole. But to that end, we need time, negotiations, debate between the different political groups. I have seen that the different political groups have come forward with their own proposals, and we need to see all those different proposals in the round, see where there is overlap agreement, see where further work might be needed to ensure implementation. Now, on migration, we are aware that we need to strike a balance. There are some that are focusing on returns, but we believe that it is important to bring in other elements, cooperation policy, for example. There's also something very important, humanitarian visas. We've been talking about this for quite some time. That could offer a different dimension to the agreement, more in keeping with the EU fundamental values. We also need to look at how we manage orderly migration flows, how we perhaps link this to unemployment in member states or lack of labour. So that's very important. Europe is an old continent. We need workers to contribute towards the social security systems in different countries. They would bring something to the system, pay taxes, work in the system. And I think that's something we need to discuss calmly. We need to flag the positives. Not everything linked to migration is bad or negative. There are opportunities to be explored, and we need to work on that. And I think it'll be interesting to do so.
The clock, Eddie, please. Mike, please, and please introduce yourself.
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, can't do anything right. Eddie Wax, Politico. Part of the problem with some of these discussions post-Qatargate is that the discussions, the debates about transparency are happening in camera. So what does your group think about this? Should, for example, the Conference of Presidents, where all these transparency proposals are being discussed, is happening in secret? Do you think that they should be happening in public? Should we be having public debates between political groups about how to reform the Parliament? Thanks.
En primer lugar,
First of all, the Conference of Presidents is not a secret meeting. It is a meeting between representatives, group leaders, but it is not a secret meeting. You can view the minutes, look at the decisions taken there. But of course, we do need to reflect our discussions in public debate, in plenary. And last week, we held a series of discussions on this issue, discussions that people could follow directly or listen into. We suggested that we include in our debate this week the ethics body, something that we wanted to discuss, and that's part of public and open debate. And I agree with you. It's very important that citizens be able to follow what we're talking about and working on.
A final question, and then we have to close. I'm sorry, we cannot take more.
Very short. About Istanbul Convention, because now it's more than a decade that some countries in the EU haven't endorsed it. So what are the obstacles of this very important gesture that should be completed?
There are 6 countries that have not yet ratified the convention. Each of those countries will have their position, their interpretation. We do not agree. We don't understand the arguments put forward. Some say that it is an issue of competence. Others say it is linked around the definition of gender. We believe that we need a clear political commitment in support of ratification so that we can have European-wide ratification. It is true that for many years we have been insisting that this is an important issue, and we will continue our fight. The S&D will continue to fight against gender-based violence and violence against women.
Thank you, Iratxe. Thank you to all of you, and have a good week.